They thought it would be easy. A group of bikers cornering a quiet college student at dusk, their engines roaring to intimidate her. To them, it was just another game, another way to assert their dominance. But they were gravely mistaken. The woman they chose to threaten wasn't just a student. She was a former Marine with years of combat experience and a black belt in karate. What began as an evening of threats and bravado quickly turned into a confrontation they could never have anticipated. This isn't a story about submission or fear. But let's start at the beginning. In the dim glow of the karate studio, the sound of deliberate, powerful punches echoed as Alexandra drove her fists into a heavy bag. Each movement was precise, calculated, like a coiled spring ready to release. Her dark brown hair was tied back tightly, beads of sweat glistening on her brow. This was her refuge, the place where the noise of the outside world faded, and the weight of her past found a release. She paused to catch her breath, staring into the mirror. The reflection stared back with hardened eyes, shaped by discipline and experience. Faint scars adorned her knuckles, and a small one above her brow served as reminders of a life she rarely spoke of. Her years in the Marines had forged her into who she was today, though those days of regimented military life were behind her. Still, memories of long nights and harsh terrains in faraway lands lingered, unshakable. Executing a flawless spinning kick, Alexandra's focus faltered as an unwelcome flashback intruded. She was back in the desert, her squad pinned down under relentless gunfire. The acrid smell of gunpowder and the deafening roar of chaos filled her senses. The mission had gone disastrously wrong, and she remembered the sinking realization that not everyone would make it out alive. Shaking her head sharply, Alexandra pulled herself back to the present. She channeled the intrusive memories into a flurry of punches, striking the bag as though trying to pummel the past into submission. The creak of the gym door broke her concentration. A hesitant figure stepped in, her presence almost swallowed by the shadows. It was Elena Cross, a fellow student on campus. She looked timid, her wide eyes darting nervously, as though bracing for a reprimand for intruding. Alexandra lowered her hands, wiping the sweat from her brow with a towel. "Hey, Elena," she greeted, her tone steady and calm. "What brings you here?" Elena hesitated, shifting her weight anxiously from one foot to the other. She clutched her bag tightly, her knuckles pale. I need your help," she stammered, her voice barely audible. Raising an eyebrow, Alexandra remained silent, waiting for Elena to elaborate. The young woman took a shaky breath, as though summoning all her courage. "It's the bikers. The ones hanging around the parking lot. They've been harassing me and some of the other students." Alexandra's expression darkened, her mind sharpening. The group Elena referred to was well known. The Black Talons, a notorious biker gang that had recently begun frequenting the campus. Loud, brash, and always seeking to assert dominance through intimidation, their presence was a growing source of unease. Campus security had done little to address the issue, leaving students too frightened to act. "What exactly have they been doing?" Alexandra asked, her voice calm but tinged with concern. Elena looked down at her feet, her shoulders curling inward as though trying to shrink away. "They block my path when I'm walking home. They say awful things, and sometimes they grab my bag or push me." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she looked up at Alexandra with pleading eyes. "I didn't know who else to ask." Alexandra's jaw tightened. She had seen too much bullying, both in uniform and out of it. Her first instinct was to march straight to the bikers and put an end to it, but she knew better than to act without a plan. "I'll help," Alexandra said, her voice firm and resolute. "But you need to report this to campus security first." Elena shook her head vehemently. "They won't do anything. Everyone knows that. Please, Alexandra. You're the only one who can stand up to them." Alexandra sighed, her gaze meeting Elena's desperate eyes. A silent plea from someone who had endured too much. "All right," she said after a pause. "I'll take a look at the situation. But no promises. Okay?" Elena nodded quickly, relief washing over her face. "Thank you," she whispered. As Elena left, Alexandra grabbed her water bottle and took a long sip, her mind already racing through possible scenarios. She had hoped her skills as a Marine would remain part of her past, but life had a way of pulling her back into situations where they were most needed. Alexandra put on her jacket, her muscles still taut from the workout, and prepared to leave the gym. Something inside her warned that this time, things wouldn't be as simple as usual. As she stepped into the cool evening air, the faint rumble of motorcycle engines echoed in the distance. Alexandra had heard of the Black Talons but had never faced them directly. From what she knew, they thrived on fear and chaos, targeting those they deemed weak. She wasn't in the mood to deal with their kind, but Elena's trembling voice echoed in her mind. Adjusting her jacket, she walked toward the campus parking lot, her steps measured but resolute. The streetlights flickered, casting long shadows across rows of parked cars. The quiet was broken only by occasional distant laughter and the growl of engines. Turning the corner, the silence was shattered. A group of 5 men stood at the edge of the lot, their motorcycles gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. Their leather jackets, emblazoned with aggressive symbols, marked them unmistakably as the Black Talons. At the center was Cole Mercer, tall and imposing, his tattoo-covered arms radiating menace. His sneer widened as his eyes locked onto Alexandra, who continued walking steadily toward her car, seemingly unfazed. Well, Cole called out, his tone mocking. Lost, sweetheart? This isn't a place for little college girls. Alexandra stopped, her eyes meeting his without hesitation. She quickly assessed the group, their arrogant swagger, their hands resting just a little too casually on belts or chains. A grating laugh erupted from the group, harsh and piercing in the still night air. No, Alexandra replied evenly. I'm just heading to my car. Cole took a step closer, his presence invasive, his smirk widening. Your car, huh? Maybe we should take a look at it, make sure it's safe. Another round of laughter broke out, but Alexandra didn't flinch. Her stance was steady, her gaze calm yet sharp. She could feel the adrenaline beginning to surge, a familiar sensation from her combat training. That won't be necessary, she said, her voice low but firm. Cole's smirk deepened, his eyes narrowing as he studied her. You've got guts, I'll give you that. But this isn't your turf, girl. Here we make the rules. Alexandra didn't reply immediately. Instead, she shifted her weight slightly, her posture unyielding. She wasn't looking to provoke them, but she wouldn't show weakness either. The bikers began to close in, their movements slow and calculated, like predators circling prey. Let me give you a piece of advice, Cole continued, his tone dripping with condescension. You don't belong here, so why don't you just scurry off and save yourself the trouble? Thanks for the advice, Alexandra replied coolly. But I'll be fine. Cole's amusement turned to irritation. He pulled a loose chain from his belt, letting it clink ominously as he wrapped it around his hand. You've got a smart mouth. Let's see if you're as tough as you act. The air grew thick with tension. Every fiber of Alexandra's being was ready. From nearby shadows, she caught the faint sound of footsteps. Someone was watching, too afraid to intervene. Cole raised the chain, but before he could act, Alexandra spoke, her voice cutting sharply through the night. Before you do something you'll regret, you should know this. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her college ID, holding it up to reveal the small line of text. Former Marine. I'm not just another college student. The laughter stopped abruptly. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances, their bravado faltering as her words sank in. Cole hesitated, his grip on the chain tightening, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. You're bluffing, he said, though his tone lacked its earlier confidence. Alexandra stepped forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. Try me. For a moment no one moved. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant hum of engines. Finally, sensing the shift in power, Cole let out a frustrated growl and dropped the chain. Let's go, he barked at his crew, turning sharply toward his bike. Alexandra didn't move as the bikers retreated, their bravado replaced by sullen murmurs. She stood motionless, watching their figures fade into the night, her heartbeat still pounding in her chest. She knew this wasn't over, but for now, the parking lot was quiet once again. The following morning, the college campus buzzed with unusual excitement. Students gathered in small groups, their voices hushed but animated as they scrolled through their phones. A grainy video of Alexandra facing off with the black talons in the parking lot was being shared widely. Dylan Morgan, who had recorded the entire confrontation, had posted it online with the caption, "Marine versus Bikers, Parking Lot Showdown." The video spread like wildfire, drawing a flood of comments ranging from awe to skepticism. "She didn't even flinch. Who knew we had a Marine on campus? Absolute badass." Not all reactions were positive. Some questioned the authenticity of the story, while others mocked the bikers for being taken down by a girl. The Talons got punked by a woman. Embarrassing. In the corner of the library, Alexandra sat alone. Her laptop lay open but ignored as she stared at her phone screen. She had avoided social media since the incident, but the steady stream of notifications forced her to look. Her jaw tightened as she scrolled through the video and its accompanying comments. She had worked hard to leave her military past behind, blending in as just another student. Thanks to Dylan, that anonymity had now evaporated across campus. Meanwhile, Dylan was basking in the attention. Standing near the student union, he was surrounded by a group of friends eagerly watching the view count climb. "Dude, you're blowing up!" one of them exclaimed, clapping him on the back. Dylan grinned, soaking in the spotlight. "Yeah, I mean, that was insane," he said, recounting the event for what felt like the 100th time. She just stood there, calm as anything, while the bikers were all like, "Oh no, let's get out of here." He mimicked a cowardly retreat, earning laughter from the group. But not everyone was amused. Elena Cross stood at a distance, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her expression heavy with guilt. She had seen the video too, and it weighed on her. It was because of her that Alexandra had been dragged into this mess. Elena had never wanted the video to go public, but now it seemed like the entire campus knew. Worse, she feared what the Black Talons would do next. At a small diner on the outskirts of town, Cole Mercer and his crew sat around a table. Their faces were grim as they stared at a phone resting in the center, playing the now-viral video on repeat. The boisterous laughter from the night before had been replaced by a tense silence, broken only by the occasional clatter of silverware or the hiss of the coffee machine. "This is bad, Cole," Lucas Ryder, one of the bikers, muttered in a low voice. "Real bad. People are saying we're a joke now." Cole slammed his fist on the table, making the utensils rattle. "I don't care what people are saying," he growled, his face flushed with fury. "That woman is the problem. She humiliated us. She didn't even touch us," another muttered, earning a sharp glare from Cole. "That's not the point," Cole snapped. "She made us look weak, and now, thanks to that punk. With the phone, the whole world knows about it." Lucas leaned back in his chair, his expression skeptical. "So what are we going to do about it?" Cole's lips curled into a sinister grin. "We're going to remind everyone who's in charge around here. And we're starting with her." Back on campus, Alexandra was trying to reclaim a sense of normalcy. She headed to her psychology class, hoping to bury herself in her studies and avoid further attention. But as she walked through the crowded hallway, she couldn't escape the stares and whispers. "Is that her?" "Yeah, Alexandra, the Marine. She doesn't look like much." "Are you kidding? Did you see the video? She's terrifying." Alexandra kept her head down, her expression neutral. Years in the military had taught her how to tune out distractions, but this was different. This wasn't an enemy she could face directly. It was a wave of curiosity and judgment that followed her everywhere. After class, Dylan Morgan intercepted her in the hallway, grinning broadly with his phone still in hand. "Hey, Alexandra," he called out. "You're famous. Have you seen the video? People are going nuts over it." Alexandra stopped, her gaze sharp and unwavering. "I've seen it," she replied curtly. Dylan, either oblivious or intentionally ignoring her tone, pressed on enthusiastically. "Come on, it's amazing. You showed those guys who's boss." Everyone's saying how badass you are. I didn't ask for this, Alexandra said firmly, her voice steady but resolute. Take it down. Dylan blinked, his smile faltering. Why? This is good for you. People love it. I don't care what people think, Alexandra shot back, her tone cutting. That video is going to cause more trouble than you realize. Before Dylan could respond, Elena appeared beside Alexandra, her face pale and her movements frantic. Alexandra, she said urgently, clutching at her sleeve. They're here. They're here. Alexandra's stomach tightened as she turned to see the black talons riding into campus, their motorcycles roaring like thunder. The tension in the air was palpable, the kind of charged stillness that precedes a storm no one can ignore. The guttural growl of engines rippled across the campus, silencing conversations mid-sentence. Students who had been chatting or lounging on the grass immediately turned their heads toward the noise, their voices fading into hushed whispers of fear. The black talons were back, and they didn't look like they were here to reconcile. Cole Mercer led the group, his expression carved from stone as he dismounted his bike. Behind him, Lucas Ryder and the other bikers followed, their deliberate movements radiating menace. Their presence cleared the courtyard quickly, students scattering like leaves before a storm. From the library steps, Alexandra observed them. She had anticipated something like this. Cole wasn't the kind to let things go. What she hadn't expected was their audacity, showing up in broad daylight on campus. It was a calculated move, meant to send a message, and Alexandra had no doubt who that message was for. Alexandra, Elena whispered urgently, her grip tightening on Alexandra's arm. We should go. They're looking for you. Running isn't going to solve anything, Alexandra replied, her tone calm but resolute. She stepped forward, placing herself squarely in the biker's line of sight. Cole's eyes locked onto hers immediately, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face as he approached, his boots crunching over gravel. Well, he said, his voice carrying across the courtyard. Look who we have here, the campus hero. Alexandra didn't respond, her stance steady and unflinching. She could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on her, students watching nervously from a safe distance. Somewhere in the background, she caught the faint glow of a phone screen. Someone was recording this too. You embarrassed me last night, Cole continued, his tone low but venomous. Made me and my crew look weak. I don't take kindly to that. That sounds like your problem, not mine, Alexandra replied evenly. You came looking for trouble and you found it. Maybe next time you'll think twice. Cole's smile twisted into a snarl. You think you're tough, huh? Just because you're some ex-Marine? That doesn't mean a damn thing here. This is my turf. Alexandra tilted her head slightly, her gaze steady but her muscles taut. You don't want to do this, Cole, she said, her voice edged with warning. Walk away. But Cole wasn't listening. He motioned to one of the bikers behind him, a burly man with a shaved head and a permanent scowl etched into his face. Noah, Cole barked. Teach her some respect. Noah stepped forward, cracking his knuckles ominously. The crowd gasped collectively, and Elena grabbed Alexandra's arm again. Alexandra, please, she pleaded, her voice trembling. They mean it. So do I, Alexandra said quietly, brushing Elena's hand aside. She stepped toward Noah, her eyes locked on him. If he wants to make a mistake, I won't stop him. For a fraction of a second, Noah hesitated, thrown off by her unshakable confidence. But the moment passed, and he lunged at her with a heavy swing. Alexandra moved like a shadow, sidestepping the attack with precision. In one fluid motion, she grabbed his arm, twisted it behind his back, and swept his legs out from under him. Noah hit the ground with a resounding thud, the air rushing out of his lungs. The courtyard fell silent, the only sound the distant hum of traffic. Alexandra released Noah and stepped back, her posture relaxed but her eyes razor-sharp. That was your warning, she said, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd been through far worse. Don't make me repeat myself. Cole's face darkened, his fists clenched tight. "You'll regret this," he growled. "Do you think you're untouchable? Let's see how tough you are when you're all alone." Before Alexandra could respond, the blare of a car horn cut through the tension. A campus security vehicle pulled up, and Noah Bennett, the officer on duty, stepped out with a stern expression. "What's going on here?" Bennett demanded, his eyes sweeping over the scene. He glanced at Alexandra before turning his attention to the bikers. "You all know the rules. No loitering on campus. Get out of here before I call the cops." Cole shot one last hateful glare at Alexandra before jerking his head at his crew. "Let's go," he spat through gritted teeth. The Black Talons mounted their bikes, engines roaring as they sped off the campus grounds. As the crowd began to disperse, Bennett approached Alexandra. "I don't know what's going on between you and them," he said evenly. "But whatever it is, it ends here. Do you understand?" Alexandra nodded, though she knew in her gut that Cole wasn't finished. She glanced at Elena, who was still trembling beside her. "It's going to be okay," Alexandra said, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "We'll handle this." But as she walked away, her mind churned. Cole's threats weren't idle. The Black Talons weren't done, and Alexandra knew she needed to be ready for whatever came next. On the winding road leading away from campus, the roar of motorcycles echoed like thunder. Cole Mercer gripped his handlebars tightly, his knuckles white with rage. The humiliation of retreating a second time gnawed at him, fueling a fire of vengeance that burned hotter with every passing moment. He replayed the scene in his head, the unshakable calm in Alexandra's demeanor, the way she had effortlessly taken Noah down. It wasn't just the physical defeat that stung. It was her eyes, filled with unflinching confidence and a complete lack of fear. For Cole, that was unacceptable. When the group arrived at a dusty lot behind an abandoned gas station, their usual meeting spot, Cole killed his engine and dismounted. He paced furiously, his anger barely contained. Lucas Ryder leaned against his bike, his expression a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The rest of the crew lingered nearby, their usual bravado dimmed by the memory of their encounter. "We can't let her get away with this," Cole roared, his voice slicing through the tense silence. "That Marine thinks she can make fools out of us? We'll show her what happens when you mess with the Black Talons." Lucas crossed his arms, his brow furrowing. "Cole, she's not like anyone we've dealt with before. She's trained. You saw how she handled Noah." Cole spun around, his eyes blazing. "You think I don't know that? You think I don't understand what we're up against?" He jabbed a finger in Lucas's direction, his voice. "Icy. That's why we need to be smart about this. No more public confrontations. We hit her where it hurts." "And where's that?" Lucas asked skeptically. "She doesn't seem like someone who scares easily." Cole's lips curled into a malicious grin. "Everyone has a weakness. If we can't take her down directly, we'll go after the people she cares about. Starting with that little friend of hers, the one who clings to her like a scared rabbit." "Cross?" Noah asked, still rubbing his shoulder where Alexandra had taken him down. "She's nothing, barely worth our time." Cole's voice was cold and deliberate. "She's the target. We make an example of her, and Alexandra won't have a choice but to back down." Uneasy glances flickered between the bikers. This was a dangerous escalation, even for them. But Cole's authority was absolute. No one dared challenge him outright. On campus, Elena Cross tried to focus in class, but her mind was a storm of anxiety. The events of the past few days left her restless and unsettled. Everywhere she went, she felt eyes on her, judging, pitying, because she had been dragged into the mess with the Black Talons. The video of Alexandra's confrontation with the bikers only made things worse, drawing unwanted attention to everyone involved. The feeling of being watched lingered constantly. As she crossed the quad, Elena glanced over her shoulder, her heart skipping a beat at the sight of a group of unfamiliar men standing near the fountain. They weren't wearing the signature leather jackets of the Black Talons, but their posture and piercing stares sent alarms through her mind. Elena quickened her pace, clutching her books tightly to her chest. Reaching the safety of the library, she spotted Alexandra sitting at a table in the back, surrounded by notebooks and textbooks. Alexandra looked up as Elena approached, her expression softening slightly. "Hey!" Alexandra greeted. "You okay?" Elena shook her head, her voice trembling. "I think they're watching me. Not Cole or the others. Someone else. I don't feel safe." Alexandra's jaw tightened as she closed her notebook. "Sit down," she said firmly. "Tell me everything." As Elena recounted what she had seen, Alexandra's mind raced, piecing together the implications. The bikers were escalating, and if they were targeting Elena, it meant they were running out of ways to reach Alexandra directly. That made them even more dangerous. "We need to report this," Alexandra said. "Campus security might be useless, but the police will at least document it." Elena hesitated, twisting her hands nervously. "What if it makes things worse? What if they retaliate and come after me even harder?" "They're already coming after you," Alexandra pointed out. "We can't let them think they can get away with this. Trust me, Elena. I'll do everything I can to keep you safe." Elena nodded reluctantly, her trust in Alexandra outweighing her fear. Together, they headed to the campus security office, where Noah Bennett was reviewing reports at his desk. He looked up as they entered, his face registering a mix of surprise and irritation. "You two again?" Noah said, leaning back in his chair. "What now?" Alexandra explained the situation succinctly, her tone measured but firm. Noah listened, his frown deepening with each word. When she finished, he sighed and rubbed his temples. "I get it," Noah said, wearily. "These guys are trouble, but unless they actually do something we can prove, there's not much I can do. My hands are tied." "That's not good enough," Alexandra replied, her voice sharp. "You know who they are. You know what they're capable of. Are you really going to wait until someone gets hurt before you take action?" Noah met her gaze, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to back down. "I'll file the report," he said finally. "That's all I can promise." As they left the office, Elena looked up at Alexandra with wide, uncertain eyes. "Do you think this will help?" Alexandra didn't answer right away. She'd seen too many situations where bureaucracy and red tape left people vulnerable. But she couldn't let Elena lose hope. "It's a start," she said. "But we're not going to rely on them. I'll come up with a plan." That evening, as the campus settled into a quiet calm, Alexandra patrolled the perimeter of the dormitories, her senses on high alert. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. Her instincts, honed through years of training, were rarely wrong. As Alexandra rounded a corner near the dormitory complex, she spotted a shadowy figure standing near the entrance. It was Lucas Ryder. At first, he didn't notice her, his attention absorbed in his phone. But when he looked up, his eyes widened slightly in recognition. Alexandra stepped forward, her voice calm yet commanding. "What are you doing here, Ryder?" Lucas smirked, slipping his phone into his pocket. "Just taking a stroll. Nice night, isn't it? You've got 5 seconds to get out of here before I make you regret it," Alexandra said, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. Lucas hesitated, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he raised his hands in a mock gesture of surrender. All right, I'm going. No need to go full Marine on me." He turned and walked away, and Alexandra's eyes followed him until his figure disappeared into the shadows. She didn't believe for a second that he was acting alone. This wasn't over, not yet. As night enveloped the campus, the once bustling pathways turned eerily quiet. A cool breeze rustled through the trees, and the faint glow of the streetlights cast long, trembling shadows across the empty courtyards. Alexandra sat in her dorm room, the glow of her desk lamp illuminating notebooks and her phone, which buzzed intermittently with messages from Elena. The latest message appeared on the screen. "I think they're still watching. I saw someone near the library earlier. Be careful." Alexandra quickly typed back, "Stay in your room. Lock the door. I'll handle it." But she knew this wasn't a problem that could be easily handled. Cole Mercer wasn't the type to let go of grudges, and his bold return to campus earlier had made one thing clear: He was escalating. She needed to stay ahead of him to anticipate his moves and ensure Elena, and anyone else inadvertently caught in the crossfire, stayed safe. Her thoughts drifted back to Lucas Ryder loitering near the dorms earlier. That wasn't a coincidence. They were testing boundaries, scouting the area, and possibly searching for weaknesses. Leaning back in her chair, Alexandra tapped her fingers rhythmically against the desk. She'd faced threats like this before, but this wasn't a battlefield with clear rules or comrades at her side. Here she was on her own. She opened her laptop and began researching the Black Talons. A few clicks led her to articles, detailing minor run-ins with the law, allegations of intimidation, and a couple of arrests for vandalism. Nothing major, nothing that had stuck. Cole Mercer was careful, and that made him dangerous. The information didn't yield much actionable intelligence, but it confirmed what Alexandra had suspected. The Black Talons thrived on fear. They used it to control, to silence, and to create an aura of invincibility. If that facade cracked, their power would crumble. Across town, Cole sat in a dimly lit garage surrounded by his crew. The air was thick with the acrid smell of oil and gasoline, the occasional hiss of a welding torch punctuating the tense silence. On the workbench beside him lay a campus map, key locations like the dormitories, library, and student union circled in red marker. "We move tomorrow," Cole said, his voice low and resolute. "We need to remind them who's in charge. No one humiliates the Black Talons without facing consequences." Lucas raised an eyebrow, his skepticism evident. "And how exactly are we doing that? She's not the kind of person you can scare off easily." Cole leaned forward, his gaze cold and calculating. "We don't go after her directly. We go after the people around her. That little cross girl is the first target. She's weak, vulnerable. If Alexandra wants to play the hero, she'll have no choice but to come running." A murmur of agreement rippled through the group, but Lucas remained unconvinced. "You sure about this, Cole? What if it backfires?" "It won't," Cole snapped, his tone sharp as a blade. "This is how we remind everyone who rules this place. And if anyone tries to get in our way, they'll regret it." The next morning, Alexandra woke early, her mind already racing. She had spent most of the night crafting a plan. One that would protect Elena and send a clear message to the Black Talons without escalating the situation into outright violence. As much as she wanted to confront Cole directly and put an end to this, she knew any misstep could put innocent lives at risk. She met Elena at a small cafe near campus, choosing a secluded booth where they could talk in private. Elena looked drained, dark circles shadowing her eyes, her hands trembling as she held her coffee cup. "They're not going to stop, are they?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No," Alexandra admitted, her tone steady. "But that doesn't mean we're powerless. I've been thinking about how we can turn this around." Elena blinked, her expression a mixture of confusion and tentative hope. "What do you mean?" "We need to control the narrative," Alexandra explained. "Right now, they're using fear to keep people silent. But if we expose them, show the campus and the authorities exactly what they're doing, they'll lose that power." Elena frowned. "Expose them how?" "They're careful. They don't leave evidence." "Not yet," Alexandra said. "But they're planning something big. I can feel it. When they make their move, we'll be ready." Elena still looked uncertain but nodded. "For now," Alexandra said firmly. "Stay close to me. Don't be alone. Not even for a minute. And if anything feels off, anything at all, call me immediately." Later that afternoon, as Alexandra walked Elena back to the dorms, she noticed a group of students gathered near the student union. The atmosphere was charged, voices overlapping as someone held up a phone, pointing to a message displayed on the screen. "Did you see this?" one student asked, his tone laced with unease. "They're threatening her." Alexandra pushed through the crowd, narrowing her eyes as she read the message. It was an anonymous post on a campus forum, its tone simple yet chilling. "Some lessons are learned the hard way. Tick-tock, Marine." Her fists clenched as her mind processed the implications. The message wasn't subtle. Cole wanted her to know he was watching, that he was planning something. What he didn't realize was that she was watching him too. That evening, Alexandra set her plan into motion. She called Dylan Morgan, who was more than willing to help after understanding the gravity of the situation. Together, they installed a network of hidden cameras around key areas of the campus, focusing on places where Cole and his crew were most likely to strike. Dylan also agreed to use his livestream platform to discreetly spread awareness about the Black Talon's activities. "This better work," Dylan said as he adjusted one of the cameras. "I don't want to end up on their hit list." "It will," Alexandra assured him. "Just make sure you stay out of their way." By midnight, everything was in place. Alexandra returned to her room, her body weary but her mind sharp. She sat on her bed, double-checking the camera feeds on her laptop, waiting for the inevitable. She didn't have to wait long. Early in the morning, her phone buzzed with an alert. One of the cameras had detected movement near the library. Alexandra felt her heartbeat quicken as she opened the grainy live feed. There they were, Cole and his crew, their shadows long and menacing under the streetlights. Alexandra immediately took stock of the situation. She watched as Cole led the group across the courtyard, their strides purposeful and deliberate. They were carrying something, chains perhaps or steel pipes, and she knew this wasn't just an act of intimidation. This was meant to send a message, written in destruction and fear. Without hesitation, Alexandra threw on her jacket and left her room. She had already memorized the quickest path to the library, sticking to the shadows and avoiding the main walkways. As she moved, she sent a quick text to Elena. "Stay in your room. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone." Her boots made almost no sound against the pavement as she approached the rear entrance of the library. From her vantage point, she saw the Black Talons lingering near the main doors, too preoccupied scoping out the area to notice her. Lucas Ryder stood near the fountain, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings. For a brief moment, Alexandra thought he might have spotted her, but he turned away, muttering something to Cole. She withdrew deeper into the shadows, her military training taking over as she analyzed the situation. There were 5 of them, including Cole. The air around them was taut, their usual swagger replaced by a kind of anxious energy. Whatever they were planning, it wasn't their typical scare tactic. Alexandra pulled out her phone and quickly typed a message to Dylan Morgan. "They're at the library. Stay hidden but keep the feed running. We need everything. Recorded." She slipped her phone back into her pocket and took a deep breath. She had faced worse situations during her time in the Marines, but this was different. There were no teammates at her side, no heavy artillery to back her up. It was just her instincts, her training, and the stakes of keeping Elena safe. From her hiding spot, she heard Cole bark out orders. "Ryder, take the side entrance. Make sure no one's inside." Lucas nodded, breaking away from the group as the others began unpacking something from a canvas bag. A spray can, and what looked like crude homemade fireworks. Alexandra's stomach churned. They were planning to vandalize the library, maybe even set it on fire. She couldn't wait any longer. Staying hidden wouldn't stop them. Alexandra stepped out of the shadows, her voice slicing through the still night air. "You've made your point, Cole. Now pack it up and leave." The Black Talons froze, their heads snapping in her direction. Cole's lips curled into a sneer, but she caught the flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Well, look who decided to join the party," Cole drawled, his tone mocking. "The Marine herself. You've got guts showing. Up here alone." "I didn't come here for guts," Alexandra replied, her voice cold and measured. "I'm here to make sure you don't do something you'll regret." Cole laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Regret? You think I regret standing up for my crew? You think I regret showing this campus who's in charge?" He gestured to his men, who were now circling Alexandra, their movements slow and deliberate, forming a loose ring around her. "You don't scare us, Chase. Not anymore." Alexandra's gaze swept over the group, taking in their stances and positions. "You should be scared," she said, her tone unshaken. "Because if you take one more step toward that library, I'll make sure this is the last time you try something like this." Cole's smirk faltered briefly, but he masked it with bravado. "You talk a big game, Marine. Let's see if you can back it up." Cole signaled, and one of his men lunged forward, swinging a length of chain. Alexandra moved with fluid precision. She sidestepped the attack, her hand snapping out to grab his wrist and twist it sharply. The chain clattered to the ground as the man let out a cry of pain. Alexandra released him and stepped back, her stance calm but ready. "Who's next?" she asked, her tone bordering on boredom. Cole growled, his fists tightening at his sides. "You're going to regret this." Alexandra didn't bother responding. She knew better than to waste energy on words. Instead, she shifted her weight, bracing for the next attack. The tension between Alexandra and the Black Talons was electric, each side waiting for the other to make a move. Cole's lips curled into a snarl, and he signaled for two of his men to advance simultaneously. They moved in tandem, one circling to her left, the other coming straight at her. Their confidence was bolstered by their numbers. The man in front struck first, swinging a metal pipe in a wide, clumsy arc. The move was telegraphed and obvious. Alexandra ducked easily, stepping into his range. Her knee shot up into his midsection, forcing the air from his lungs. He doubled over, dropping the pipe, and Alexandra followed with a swift elbow to his back, sending him sprawling onto the ground. The second man seized the moment, charging from her side. Alexandra turned just in time, her arms coming up to deflect his punch. His momentum carried him too far forward, and she used it against him, gripping his arm and twisting it to throw him off balance. A quick kick to the back of his knee sent him collapsing to the ground, where he stayed, groaning in pain. The remaining bikers hesitated, their bravado visibly shaken. Alexandra stood her ground, her breathing steady, her stance unyielding. "This doesn't have to get worse," she said, her voice calm but edged with steel. "Walk away now, and no one else gets hurt." Cole let out a harsh, humorless laugh, but it lacked conviction. "You're making a big mistake, Chase. We're not some scared little college kids you can push around." "Are you sure about that?" Alexandra replied, arching an eyebrow. She gestured to the two men groaning on the pavement. "Because it doesn't look like you're doing too well." Cole's face darkened, his jaw tightening as he pointed toward Lucas Ryder. Lucas stepped forward with deliberate calm, his large frame radiating quiet menace. A heavy chain was wrapped around his fist. He didn't charge recklessly like the others. His cold, calculating gaze locked onto Alexandra's every move. She recognized the difference immediately. Lucas was disciplined, far more dangerous than his comrades. The two began to circle each other slowly, neither rushing to make the first move. Alexandra's heart pounded in her chest, but her breathing remained steady. She watched Lucas closely, her eyes tracking every subtle shift in his stance, waiting for the right moment. When he struck, it was fast, a sweeping blow aimed at her midsection. Alexandra sidestepped the attack, but Lucas recovered quickly, swinging the chain in a tight, controlled arc. The chain whistled past her ear as she ducked and pivoted on her heel. She lashed out with a low kick aimed at his shin, but Lucas adjusted his weight, absorbing the blow with barely a flinch. He countered with a quick jab, forcing Alexandra to step back. The fight continued, each move and counter a calculated test of skill and endurance. Lucas's strikes were powerful, but Alexandra's speed and precision gave her the upper hand. She waited, biding her time until Lucas overextended with a particularly forceful swing. In that instant, Alexandra stepped inside his reach, her hand snapping up to seize his wrist. With a sharp twist, she disarmed him, the chain falling to the ground with a metallic clink. Before Lucas could recover, Alexandra delivered a precise palm strike to his chest, sending him stumbling backward. He hit the ground hard, gasping for air but otherwise unharmed. Alexandra stepped back, her sharp gaze sweeping over the remaining bikers. "It's over," she said firmly. "Leave now." Cole's fists clenched, his face a mask of barely contained rage. "You think this is over?" he snarled, stepping toward her. "It's just beginning." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a knife, the blade glinting ominously under the streetlights. The remaining bikers exchanged uneasy glances, clearly unsettled, but none of them moved to intervene. Cole's focus was entirely on Alexandra, his expression twisted with anger and frustration. "You've pushed me too far, Chase." Alexandra didn't flinch. Her stance shifted slightly, her weight balanced and ready. "You don't want to do this, Cole," she said, her voice steady and deliberate. "Put the knife down before you make things worse for yourself." Cole's grip on the knife tightened, his knuckles whitening. With a furious yell, he lunged at her, the blade slicing through the air. Alexandra sidestepped smoothly, her hand snapping out to seize his wrist. With a sharp twist, she forced him to drop the knife, which clattered loudly to the ground. Cole cried out in pain, but Alexandra didn't let go. She pivoted behind him, wrenching his arm into a hold and driving him down to his knees. Cole's resistance drained as quickly as it had risen. He slumped forward, gasping for air, his earlier defiance replaced by a dull resignation. Alexandra released him, stepping back to maintain her distance. "Stay down," she commanded, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. For a moment, no one moved. The bikers exchanged nervous glances, their bravado thoroughly shattered. Finally, one of them muttered, "Come on, Cole, let's go." Cole didn't respond immediately. His shoulders heaved as he fought to regain his composure. When he finally rose to his feet, it was with a slow, reluctant motion. "This isn't over," he growled, his voice low and venomous. "You'll regret this." "We'll see," Alexandra replied, her tone calm and unwavering. The black talons retreated, their motorcycles roaring to life as they sped. Off into the night, Alexandra stood alone in the now empty courtyard, her heart still pounding but her resolve unshaken. She knew Cole's threat wasn't idle, but at least for tonight, the immediate danger had passed. As the rumble of engines faded into the distance, the campus fell into an eerie silence. Alexandra scanned the area one last time, ensuring no one lingered in the shadows. Her hands ached from the fight, and she took slow, deliberate breaths to steady herself, her pulse still racing. Bending down, she picked up Cole's discarded knife, turning it over in her hand. The blade was sharp but otherwise unremarkable, a tool meant to intimidate rather than inflict serious harm. Alexandra frowned, her thoughts turning to Cole's escalating recklessness. The bikers had crossed a line tonight, and she doubted it would be their last attempt. She slipped the knife into her jacket pocket and turned toward the library. She needed to check the cameras Dylan Morgan had installed. If everything had gone as planned, they would have captured the entire confrontation, providing solid evidence to present to the authorities. Her footsteps echoed softly on the pavement as she approached the main entrance. Dylan was crouched behind a stone planter, his phone clutched tightly in his hands. "Is it over?" Dylan whispered, his wide eyes peeking over the edge of the planter. Alexandra nodded, motioning for him to stand. "They're gone for now. Did you get everything?" Dylan held up his phone, the live stream still running. The chat feed was flooded with comments. "That was insane. She took them all down. Alexandra is a legend." The view count had skyrocketed during the confrontation, and the video quickly spread across multiple platforms. "Yeah, I got it all," Dylan said, his voice trembling slightly. "By the way, you're trending again." Alexandra frowned. She had never wanted this kind of attention, but if it helped expose the black talons, she was willing to endure it a little longer. "Good," she said firmly. "Keep that footage safe. We're going to need it." Dylan nodded, slipping his phone into his pocket. "So what now?" "Now," Alexandra said, her voice resolute, "we report this. No more waiting around for them to make the first move. It's time to put an end to this." 30 minutes later, Alexandra and Dylan sat in the campus security office. Officer Noah Bennett listened intently as Alexandra recounted the events of the night. His pen scratched across his notebook, the dimly lit room filled with the faint smell of stale coffee and the soft hum of a desk fan. "This is serious," Noah said, leaning back in his chair. "If what you're saying is true, And with the video to back it up, the Black Talons have crossed a line. We can't let this slide. Alexandra crossed her arms, her gaze unwavering. They crossed the line days ago. This isn't just intimidation anymore. They're targeting students and endangering lives. We need a coordinated response. Noah nodded slowly. I'll file this report tonight and forward it to the police. With the evidence you've provided, they'll have enough to open an investigation. But it might take time before we see any real action. Time isn't something we have, Alexandra shot back. Cole won't stop until he feels like he's regained control. We need to be proactive. Noah sighed, rubbing his temples. I'll do what I can, but you need to be careful, Alexandra. These guys aren't just troublemakers. They're dangerous. I know, Alexandra replied, her voice calm but firm. That's why we can't let them win. As she left the security office, a wave of exhaustion washed over Alexandra. The night's events had taken their toll, both physically and mentally, but the fight was far from over. She pulled out her phone and texted Elena, "It's safe for now. I'll update you in the morning." Elena responded almost immediately, "Thank you, Alexandra. I don't know what I'd do without you." A faint smile crossed Alexandra's face, a rare moment of light in an otherwise heavy night. She headed back to her dorm, the campus eerily quiet. The earlier tension had been replaced by an unsettling calm. She knew this was only the beginning. Cole's threats echoed in her mind like a lingering shadow, but for the first time she felt like she had the upper hand. Not far away, Cole stormed into the garage, the unofficial lair of the Black Talons. The door slammed shut behind him, hard enough to make the tools hanging on the walls rattle. His crew followed in silence, their usual bravado replaced by unease. Lucas Ryder rubbed his shoulder, still sore from Alexandra's strike, his jaw clenched in frustration. The others avoided Cole's fiery gaze, none of them eager to be the first to speak. Cole paced furiously, his boots striking the concrete floor with a relentless rhythm. His face was flushed, his fists clenching and unclenching as he replayed the night's events in his mind. "She humiliated us," he growled, his voice low but charged with fury. "Cole, we were outmatched," Lucas said cautiously. "She's not just some college kid. She's a serious problem. A problem needs to be dealt with," Cole snapped, slamming his fist onto the workbench. A wrench clattered to the floor, the sound sharp and jarring in the tense silence. The room fell into silence, the weight of unspoken doubts pressing down on the group. Finally, one of the younger bikers hesitated, then spoke nervously. "What about the video? It's all over campus. Everyone's calling her a hero." Cole spun around, his glare sharp enough to cut through steel. "I don't care about the video," he snarled. "This isn't about what people think. This is about control. And right now, she's the only thing standing in our way." Lucas shifted uncomfortably. "Cole, maybe it's time to back off. This isn't worth it anymore. The students, security, even the cops, they're all watching us now. If we push any harder, we'll be the ones behind bars." Cole's jaw tightened, and for a moment, it seemed like he might explode. But then he straightened, his expression turning ice cold. "If you're scared, Lucas, no one's stopping you from walking out that door." Lucas held Cole's gaze for a long moment before shaking his head. "I'm just saying we need to think this through." Cole didn't respond. Instead, he turned back to the workbench, his mind already plotting a new plan. Meanwhile, Alexandra sat at her desk, reviewing the footage Dylan had sent from the library cameras. Every angle was crystal clear. The bikers' arrival, their attempt to intimidate, and their eventual retreat. The footage was more than enough to build a solid case against them. But Alexandra knew better than to rely solely on bureaucracy. Cole wouldn't stop until he felt like he'd won, or until he realized that continuing the fight would cost him more than he could bear. Her phone buzzed with a message from Noah. "Report filed. Cops are reviewing the footage. Stay on guard." She quickly replied, "Thanks. Let me know if anything comes up." A risky plan was forming in Alexandra's mind. It was her best chance to end this once and for all. She needed to confront Cole directly, not with fists or threats, but with undeniable truth. The harder he pushed, the more he would lose. Alexandra wasn't afraid of him, and she would make sure he understood that fear was no longer a weapon he could wield against anyone. The following evening, Cole received an unexpected text. The message was simple. Meet me at the old bridge at midnight. No backup, just you and me. Cole stared at the screen, his lips curling into a menacing smirk. He didn't need to guess who had sent it. She wants a showdown, he muttered, tossing the phone onto the table. Fine, I'll give her one. At the stroke of midnight, Alexandra was already waiting at the old bridge. The structure, once a bustling thoroughfare, had long since fallen into disrepair. Its rusted steel beams and cracked surface stood stark against the glow of the moon, casting eerie shadows across the empty expanse. The roar of a motorcycle broke the silence. Cole pulled up a few feet away, dismounting with deliberate slowness. He made no attempt to conceal the knife tucked into his belt, its blade glinting coldly as he approached. You've got guts. I'll give you that, Cole said, his voice carrying easily through the still night. But guts only get you so far. I didn't come here to fight, Alexandra said, her tone calm but firm. I came to talk. Cole laughed, a sharp and hollow sound. Talk? After everything that's happened, you think I want to sit down and chat? You should, Alexandra replied, because if you don't, you're going to lose everything. Cole's smirk faltered, but he stayed silent. Alexandra took a step closer, her stance loose but resolute. You think this is about power, about control. But every time you try to prove yourself, you lose more allies. The students, the authorities, even your own crew, they're starting to doubt you, Cole. They're not blind. Cole clenched his jaw, but he didn't respond. Keep pushing, Alexandra continued, her voice steady but piercing. I'll be there every time to stop you, and it won't just be me. The more you escalate, the more people will stand against you. You can't win this. For a fleeting moment, Cole's bravado cracked, revealing the uncertainty and frustration simmering beneath. But he quickly masked it, his sneer returning. You think you're so righteous, don't you? Some kind of savior. I'm just someone who doesn't let bullies win, Alexandra replied, her tone calm yet firm. The choice is yours, Cole. Stop now or keep going and watch everything you've built fall apart. The silence stretched between them, heavy with tension. Finally, Cole let out a bitter laugh and shook his head. You're something else, Chase. I'll give you that. He turned and walked back toward his motorcycle, his steps slow and deliberate. Without another word, he mounted the bike, the engine roaring to life. Moments later, he was gone, swallowed by the night. Alexandra exhaled slowly, her shoulders easing as the weight of the confrontation began to lift. It wasn't the decisive victory she had hoped for, but it was enough for now. The next morning, the campus buzzed with whispers and speculation. No one had witnessed the midnight meeting between Alexandra and Cole, but the absence of the Black Talons spoke volumes. The usual roar of their motorcycles was conspicuously absent, as was the oppressive sense of intimidation they had cultivated for weeks. Alexandra sat quietly in the corner of the campus cafe, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee. She observed the students moving about, their conversations returning to mundane topics. Exams, weekend plans, upcoming events. For the first time in weeks, the air was free of fear, the murmured worries about the biker's next target replaced by an almost palpable sense of relief. Across from her, Elena Cross was hunched over her notebook, scribbling notes for an essay. Though her studious demeanor was unchanged, there was a new brightness in her eyes. That morning, for the first time in weeks, she had walked across campus without the crushing weight of dread. It feels different, doesn't it? Elena said softly, glancing up from her notebook. Alexandra nodded, taking a sip of her coffee. It does. But don't let your guard down. Elena frowned slightly. Do you think they'll come back? They might, Alexandra admitted. But I don't think Cole will push this any further, not after last night. Elena tilted her head. What did you say to him? I gave him a choice, Alexandra replied simply, and made sure he understood the consequences. Elena offered a faint smile. You make it sound easy. It wasn't, Alexandra said, her tone serious. But it was necessary. In the old garage, Cole sat alone, his hands resting on the handlebars of his motorcycle. His crew had scattered after the previous night, some muttering about needing time to think, others openly questioning his leadership. Lucas Ryder had been the most candid, pointing out that Cole's obsession with proving himself had only brought trouble. Cole's jaw tightened as Alexandra's words echoed in his mind. She had seen straight through him, cutting past his bravado and bravely challenging the foundation of his power. It wasn't about the fights or the confrontations, it was about control. And he had lost it, not just over the campus, but over his crew and, worst of all, over himself. The rumble of a motorcycle engine broke Cole's thoughts. Lucas pulled up nearby, dismounted, and walked over, his expression unreadable. Cole, Lucas started cautiously. You've been quiet since last night. Cole didn't respond immediately, his gaze fixed on the horizon. What's there to say? He muttered. She was right. I pushed too hard. Lucas studied him for a moment before nodding. So what now? Cole let out a heavy sigh. We pull back. Lay low for a while. Let things cool off. Lucas's lips curved into a faint smirk. Finally listening to reason, huh? Don't push it, Cole replied, though his tone lacked the usual sharpness. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of his decisions and the realization that it was time to change. That evening, Alexandra attended a meeting with Officer Noah Bennett and a representative from the local police department. The footage from the library cameras and Dylan's live stream had been thoroughly reviewed. While it wasn't enough to bring serious charges against the Black Talons, the authorities made it clear that any further infractions would result in immediate consequences. We'll increase patrols around campus, the officer assured her. If they show up again, we'll be ready. Alexandra nodded, though she doubted the bikers would return so soon. Cole's retreat wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. He had been forced to confront his limits, a defeat more cutting than any physical blow. As she left the meeting, Dylan caught up with her outside, his phone in hand as always. Hey Alexandra, Dylan said, quickening his pace to match hers. You're officially a campus legend now. The video hit over 100,000 views. Alexandra rolled her eyes, though a small smile tugged at her lips. That's the last thing I wanted. Yeah, but it's what people needed, Dylan replied earnestly. You stood up when no one else could. You gave them hope. I just did what anyone should, Alexandra said. Maybe, Dylan said, but not everyone does. In the days that followed, the campus settled into an unusual quiet. Life returned to its normal rhythm, and the Black Talons seemed to have vanished. The roar of motorcycles and the aura of intimidation were now just memories. But for those directly affected, Elena, Dylan, and Alexandra, the events of the past weeks left an indelible mark. Elena began attending self-defense classes, determined to reclaim her sense of security. Dylan continued leveraging his social media platform, transforming it from casual entertainment to a tool for advocacy and awareness. Alexandra, while avoiding the spotlight as much as possible, found herself drawn into conversations with students who viewed her as a symbol of resilience and strength. One afternoon, Elena approached Alexandra outside the library, her expression resolute. I've been thinking, she began. What if we started a support group for students who've been through things like this? Alexandra considered. The idea for a moment, a smile touching her face. That's a good idea, Elena. I think a lot of people could use that. You'll help me set it up, right? Elena asked, her voice filled with hope. Of course, Alexandra replied. Whatever you need. As Elena lit up with excitement, Alexandra felt a quiet sense of pride. She had stepped into the fight to protect those who couldn't protect themselves, and in doing so, she had inspired them to find their own strength. Alexandra stood at the edge of the gymnasium stage, the echoes of laughter and voices filling the expansive space around her. Students practiced self-defense techniques under the guidance of seasoned instructors. The self-defense workshop, organized by Elena and supported by Alexandra, had drawn an unexpectedly large crowd. Word had spread quickly across campus, turning the event into a powerful symbol of resilience and encouragement. Elena stood at the front of a group, confidently demonstrating a simple wrist escape technique. Her voice rang out clearly, encouraging participants to try the move for themselves. Alexandra couldn't suppress a smile as she watched. Just weeks ago, Elena had been too timid to walk across campus alone. Now she was leading others, her fear replaced with determination. Dylan wove through the crowd, phone in hand, capturing footage of the event. "This is amazing," he said, approaching Alexandra. "We've got over 200 people here, and the live stream is blowing up. People love what you started." "I didn't start this," Alexandra corrected. "Elena did. She's the one who turned this into something bigger." Dylan smirked. "Yeah, but she wouldn't have done it without you. You gave her the courage to stand up in the first place." Alexandra shrugged, her gaze returning to the students practicing on the mats. She always had it in her. She just needed someone to remind her. As the event wound down, Alexandra sat on the edge of the gym stage, watching the last few participants file out. Elena approached with a water bottle in hand and a bright smile. "I can't believe how many people showed up," Elena said, her excitement evident. "And they actually want to do this again. Can you imagine? We could make this a regular thing." "I think you should," Alexandra said. "The more people who know how to defend themselves, the better." Elena hesitated, her smile faltering slightly. "Alexandra, can I ask you something?" "Of course," Alexandra replied. "Why did you get involved?" Elena asked, her tone serious. "I mean, you didn't have to. You could have ignored everything and stayed out of it." "Why didn't you?" Alexandra thought for a moment, her gaze distant. "When I was in the military, I saw a lot of people who had no one to stand up for them. It's a terrible feeling, being powerless, knowing no one's coming to help. I couldn't let that happen here, not when I could do something about it." Elena nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "You're a good person, Alexandra, even if you don't like to admit it." Alexandra chuckled softly. "I just do what I think is right." That evening, as Alexandra walked back to her dorm, she felt a rare sense of peace. The campus seemed brighter somehow. The oppressive tension of the past weeks lifted. She passed small groups of students chatting and laughing, their faces free of the worry that had once been so pervasive. At the dorm's reception desk, a stack of mail awaited. Among the usual flyers and notices was a letter addressed to her, in unfamiliar handwriting. Opening it carefully, Alexandra's brow furrowed as she read. "Alexandra, you were right. I've been thinking about what you said, and I'm done fighting battles that don't matter. I need to figure out who I am without all the noise. Thanks for making me see that, Cole." Alexandra stared at the letter for a long time, a mix of surprise and quiet satisfaction washing over her. She hadn't expected Cole to reach out, let alone admit the truth from their confrontation. It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was a step forward, a sign that even the most stubborn individuals could change. Tucking the letter into her desk drawer, she felt a gentle sense of closure. Cole's words weren't just an ending. They were a poignant reminder that every action, every choice, could ripple outward, touching lives in ways she might never fully grasp. In the weeks that followed, the campus continued its journey of recovery. The self-defense workshops became a regular event, drawing not only students but also faculty and staff. Elena took charge, her confidence blossoming with each session she led. Dylan leveraged his social media platform to promote the workshops, transforming his once casual, entertainment-focused approach into a tool for advocacy and community building. Alexandra, though she avoided the spotlight, became a quiet pillar of support. Students sought her out for advice, not just about safety, but about life. Her past, which she had long tried to leave behind, had become a wellspring of strength, not only for herself but also for those around her. One afternoon, as she walked through the quad, Alexandra saw a group of students practicing self-defense techniques. They waved to her, their faces bright with gratitude and respect. Alexandra smiled in return, her heart swelling with a sense of purpose, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. In that moment, she realized that her journey wasn't just about protecting others. It was about rediscovering herself, her values, her strength, and her place in the world. And in doing so, she had helped create something far greater than herself. A community built on resilience, courage, and the belief that no one should ever have to face their battles alone. Alexandra's story reminds us that courage doesn't come from strength or power, but from the heart and the willingness to stand up for what's right. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to summon your strength to stand up for yourself or someone else? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story could inspire others, bring hope, and spread positivity throughout our community. If this story resonated with you, share it with friends and loved ones to spread the message of kindness and resilience. Thank you for spending your time with us. Don't forget to follow Mr. Wisdom Story to explore more inspiring tales. These stories are collected and shared to promote the core values of humanity and have been thoughtfully curated with the assistance of AI. If there are any oversights, we appreciate your understanding and feedback. Wishing you endless joy and the very best in life.